you. Today we are going psychological insight and look back in anger. Look back in anger. Look Back in Anger, that was 1956 John Osborne's play and 1959 movie about the love triangle involving an intelligent but disaffected young man Jimmy Potter and his upper middle class impassive wife Allison and her naughty best friend Helena Charles. Look Back in Anger is well made problem play of a considerable psychological insight. The plot of Look Back in Anger moves on emotional track from love, jealousy, misunderstanding, hatred, and reconciliation. Osborne showed reciprocal relation of people's mentality and society, portraying the post-World War human with mental or psychological and social problems. Osborne gives various moral messages. John Osborne, his full name is John James Osborne. He was born at 12 December 1929 and he left the world at 24 December 1994. Was an English playwright, screenwriter, actor, and critic of the establishment. In his creative work, dramatic expression comes with a perfect naturalness and ease. His plays has a sense of social complexity. The social alienation is the feeling of being trapped in a world of meaningless codes and customs. With the publication of his plays, Osborne is linked with the angry young man group. Themes of the play. First one we are discussing alienation and loneliness. Jimmy Potter spoke for a language segment of British population in 1956 when he ranted about his alienation from a society in which he was denied any meaningful role. Jimmy's alienation from Allison comes precisely because he cannot break through her cool, her unwillingness to feel deeply, even during sexual intercourses with her husband. He calls her Lady Pusillanimous. He says, "My heart is so full, I feel ill, and she wants peace." His anger and hatred. There's a theme of anger and hatred. Jimmy Potter operates out of deep well of anger. One catalyst for his anger can be found in his experience as a 10 years old of watching his idealist father dying from wounds received fighting for democracy in the Spanish Civil War. His father talking for hours, pouring out all that was left of his life to one beloved little boy. He says, I quote, "You see, I learned at an early age what it was to be angry and helpless, and I can never forget it." Unquote. We are discussing one short video of this play.
What did you do that for?
I wanted to listen to the concert, that's all.
What's stopping you?
Everyone's making such a din, that's what's stopping me.
Sorry, but I can't just stop everything because you want to listen to music.
Why not?
Really, Jimmy? You're like a child.
Don't try and patronise me! But you're so clumsy. Have you ever noticed how noisy women are? The way they kick the floor about simply by walking over it? Or have you seen them at their dressing tables, dropping their weapons and banging their bits of boxes and brushes and lipsticks? I watch her doing it night after night. I had a flat under a couple of girls once. Oh, you heard everything those damn bastards did all day and all night. With these two, even the most simplest, everyday actions were like a kind of assault course on your sensibilities. I tried everything with them. I used to plead with them. I even got to screaming the most ingenious obscenities I could up the stairs at them. But nothing would move them. With these two, even the simplest trip to the lavatory sounded like a medieval siege. Oh, they beat me in the end. I had to go. I mean, they're probably still at it, or they're married by now, driving some other poor devils out of their minds, banging their doors and stamping their high heels, banging their irons and their saucepans, the eternal flaming racket of a female. Oh, now the bells have started. Just wrap it up.
That was his anger. Then class conflict. Jimmy comes from a working class and although some of his mother's relatives are petty push, Cliff tells Allison that Jimmy hates him as much as he hates her family. It is Nigel, the straight-backed, chainless wanderer, who went to Sandhurst, who Jimmy believes to be stupid and insensitive. Allison's father, Cornelia Redfern, is not shown unsymmetrically, but her mother is portrayed as a class-conscious monster. The only person for whom Jimmy's love is apparent is his working-class mother. Jimmy likes Cliff because, as Jimmy himself says, I'm common. Then identity crisis. While Jimmy harangues everyone around him to open themselves to honest feeling, he is struggling with his own problems of identity. As Colonel Redfern points out, operating a sweet stall seems an odd occupation for an educated young man. Allison, who seems immune to this, does finally suffers the immeasurable loss of her unborn child and comes back to Jimmy, who seems to embarrass her. Helena discovers that she can be herself only if she lives according to her principle of right and wrong. Cliff does seem to have a strong sense of what he is, accepts that, and will move on with his life. Then we are discussing plot. The construction of Look Back in Anger is that of a classic, well-made play in the tradition of Henrik Ibsen, Augustus Strindberg, Tennessee Williams, or most of Osborne's contemporary commercial playwrights. There is some exposition that have been characterized as a clumsy, such as when Jimmy tells Allison, to whom he has been married 3 years, how his business has been financed. Cliff's existed in Act 2 to buy cigarettes and his unconvincing reason for returning a couple of minutes later, just as Allison is about to tell Jimmy that she is pregnant. The end of Act 2, Scene 2, with the two women left looking at each other, has viewed as artificial. Then we are discussing our topic, psychological insight in Look Back in Anger. Degeneration of feeling and language. Osborne had dramatized communal question in order to arouse social concise. The play presents the frustrated outburst of Jimmy, the angry young man he franchised with resentment against conservative class system. He replicates his new circumstances and surrounding in which he is facing mental and social problems. Instead of facing the problems, the protagonist is just gamble for peoples and situation in which he is living. The social conscience diminishes with the sense of loss of obligation, although he married with Allison for having a sincere affection. But he never takes her responsibility as a husband. Jimmy's sense of loss of obligation gives message that the generation after World War is becoming irresponsible. It doesn't want to take the responsibility of one's relation and society too. Sense of loss of emotion is the reason for indifferent attitude of new generation towards the society. Through Jimmy's anger, Osborne pointed out a degeneration of feeling and language. It is noticed most of the times in the play Jimmy renunciates Allison and Cliff for their being devoid of emotions, while criticizing Allison and Cliff for their coldness. Jimmy notes that he too is emotionless. Once he said that Allison should have misery of loss of child. Only an emotionless husband can wish so for one's wife. His impassiveness makes him important. As such is devoid of emotion. He is without any ambition. It is not because he is unable to advance in personal as well as social life. This sense of loss of ability alienated him from the society. Jimmy's inability gives moral to the reader that sense of loss of emotion leads to the loss of ambition that ultimately leads to the sense of loss of ability. Such spiritless persons, instead of correcting one's fault, they just grumble about everything. The protagonist famous complaint in Look Back in Anger, I quote, "There aren't any good, brave causes left. If the Big Bang does come and we all get killed off, it won't be in aid of old-fashioned grand design. It will just be for the brave new nothing. Very much thank you." Unquote. He often states that there are no good brave causes left in the world. In fact, he daily rails against dozens of enemies, the advertisers, the church, politicians, aristocrats, cinema audiences, and others. There are too many causes worth fighting for, and their sheer magnitude renders Jimmy important. The problem is need to realize it, his irrelevance and castigating wit or an imposture, an attempt to shield himself from his failure to take meaningful action. Not only Jimmy, but also his grandfather, grand, sorry, uh, his father-in-law, Cornelia Redfern, also repents, resents for um, present and repents for his conduct. Jimmy seems almost envious of those he criticizes, the man for whom he professes the greatest resentment. Cornelia Redfern had a golden age, whereas Jimmy aggregates in vacuum. With Jimmy's tirades, Osborne points out how the sense of loss of potential makes oneself envious. John Adamson also observes perplexity in Jimmy. To quote him, I quote, Jimmy was not just the critic of his society, he was also the object for criticism. He was the chief example of social malence which he was attacking. Through Jimmy Potter, Osborne had opened it up a much wider subject than rebelliousness or youthful anger, that of social alienation, the feeling of being trapped in a world of meaningless codes and custom. Unquote. John Adamson also observes ambivalence in Jimmy. He is a confusing combination of sincerity and cheerful malice, of tenderness and freebooting cruelty. Osborne presents a small group of post-World War young people who are existing in sorry state of emotional and physical squalor. He gives a close-up to the marital relationship between immensely resentful graduate of working class origin and the passively submissive young women, woman. The portrayal of Jimmy is to depict the changing moods of the present generation. Jimmy's love-hate emotion is one of the reasons for his failure of marriage. Osborne gives more a message that loss of emotion, endurance, and compatibility leads to the loss of relation. A marriage could not be survived unless it has emotion, honesty, endurance, and the most important, compatibility. In conclusion, expression of various sense of loss in Look Back in Anger from the moral order, Osborne warns against the impending doom on the present generation, which lost its direction with sense of loss. The play's more exploration in precisely this field. It functions as a replica of England and its generation that lost its direction in anarchy after World War. It seems one consistent feature in Osborne's English plays in the view that contemporary society is suffering from degeneration of feeling and language. It displays how the hero's isolation becomes increasingly an impatient and wholesale rejection of modern times. In short, observing the post-World War and dealing with psyche of that world, Osborne represented degeneration of generation. In Look Back in Anger, he gave voice to the individual as well as social problems. Jimmy's bad manners, rejection of middle class mores was seen as the clarion of neglected generation. Because of this psychological remarks of Jimmy, Look Back in Anger was regarded as the harbinger of the new left and of the companion for nuclear disarmament. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you all. Thank you.